My stepson's abusive behavior and my husband's betrayal led me to divorce. But what happened next was my ultimate revenge. My stepson, Kevin, whom I began living with after remarrying, had never accepted me as his mother from the beginning, causing me years of hardship. "Divorce, Dad, and get out of this house." Kevin hurled these words at me mockingly as I stood there silently. When I heard Kevin's words, what I felt was not anger, but pity. He had finally crossed a line that should never be crossed. After all the hard work I went through, he managed to get a recommendation to a prestigious university. With his careless words, my husband's conniving son was going to lose everything. "All right," I responded quietly. My husband, David, who had been watching from the background, pushed a piece of paper into my hand with a gleeful smile. "This will make a great gift for Kevin's acceptance. Fill this out and submit it today." It was a divorce paper. I could feel my body trembling at David's words as I looked down, shaking. David coldly told me to leave, and with that, the door was mercilessly closed in my face. The words, "You reap what you sow," crossed my mind. Now, I had no reason to show them any leniency. Shaking with anger, I contacted someone to set my long-prepared plan into motion. Soon, David and Kevin would plunge headlong into the abyss. My name is Emily, a 47-year-old part-time housewife. Currently, I live with my husband, David, and my stepson, Kevin. I have been troubled by David's and Kevin's attitudes for years. However, David and I are both remarried, and Kevin is not my biological child. David and I have been living together for about 10 years when I was 32. I lost my first husband in an accident. I had no children with my first husband, so I thought I would have to live the rest of my life alone, and I was overwhelmed by its length. 5 years later, when I was 37, my boss, who had been taking care of me, suggested a matchmaking meeting with my current husband, David. At that time, I was throwing myself into work to overcome the grief of losing my first husband. To my boss, I must have seemed quite pitiful. Just meet with him once. "It's not a bad match for you," he said. With that, my boss quickly set a date for the matchmaking meeting. I reluctantly agreed to my boss's somewhat forceful suggestion. I did so because my boss had been very helpful to me and my late husband, and we were close as a family even after my husband passed away. My boss was always there for me. Having lost my parents early and having no other relatives, my boss was like a father to me. Wanting to honor my boss, I decided to meet the man just once. On the day of the meeting, I went with my boss to the restaurant set up for the occasion. There, waiting for us, were David, his father, Tom, and David's son, Kevin. My boss and Tom introduced us to each other, and we began our meal in a friendly atmosphere. Since my boss and Tom were friends, they were chatting happily. "Yes, just as I heard, she is a wonderful woman," Tom said, nodding gently while looking at me. My boss chimed in enthusiastically. "Yeah, Emily is really diligent and trustworthy. She's a remarkable person who'd make anyone proud." As the two of them chatted animatedly, David, Kevin, and I quietly picked at our food. I glanced at David and Kevin and noticed they both looked a bit displeased. At that time, David had just gotten divorced, and his son Kevin was only 8. I assumed they were just nervous. Noticing my concern for David and Kevin, Tom spoke to me. "Kevin still needs a mother at his age. If you were willing, would you consider marrying David?" Tom's pained request weighed heavily on my mind. However, having no experience raising children, I was unsure if I could raise an 8-year-old. My boss reassured me, saying, "Your kindness will be enough." Before I knew it, David proposed to me. I thought it was a bit soon and consulted my boss, who was thrilled. Furthermore, with Tom being very enthusiastic about the match, it became hard for me to refuse. In the end, I reluctantly accepted David's proposal, and we got married. Thus, I found myself marrying David and starting a life with Kevin and Tom. However, married life turned out to be very different from what I had imagined. At the beginning of our marriage, I tried to be close to David and Kevin. I asked about their favorite foods, and no matter how busy I was, I always prepared homemade meals for them after work. But the only one who appreciated my efforts was Tom. David and Kevin remained distant, offering no comments about the meals I made. Moreover, neither David nor Kevin talked to me, and I was bewildered by the lack of conversation in our home. To make matters worse, when they saw my belongings being moved in, they complained. "I don't want you to bring in any more stuff. You're making the place feel cramped. If you bring in more things, there won't be room for Mom's stuff," David said calmly. In contrast, Kevin would hurl insults at me in a fit of rage. I didn't know how to handle Kevin, so I ended up staying silent. Seeing that I didn't argue back, Kevin started making more and more demands. David never reprimanded Kevin for his increasingly rude comments. Instead, David teamed up with Kevin and made accusatory comments towards me. "That's right. You have too many unnecessary things, especially this watch. Why do you even have a man's watch? Are you cheating or something?" David said, as he tried to take one of the few pieces of jewelry I owned. I couldn't help but scream, "Please stop, don't say such awful things. That watch is my father's only keepsake." With tears in my eyes, I pleaded weakly, and David clicked his tongue while Kevin stuck his tongue out at me. "Hey Dad, I know something. Those kinds of watches can sell for a good price online. I saw it in a video yesterday," Kevin said. David smirked unpleasantly at Kevin's words and began laughing loudly. "Oh yeah, maybe I should sell it for some extra cash," David said with a vile grin, and he tried to take the watch from my hand. "Stop it! What do you think you're doing?" Just as David was about to snatch the watch, Tom returned from being out and saw what was happening. He shouted at David and Kevin. David and Kevin shrank back and started mumbling excuses. "It's nothing. We were just teasing her a bit, trying to bond," David said. "Yeah, this old lady cries too easily," Kevin added cheekily, but Tom reprimanded him harshly. "She's not old lady. Emily has become your mother." Tom firmly placed his hands on Kevin's shoulders, looked him in the eye, and spoke in a strong tone. "Listen, Kevin. From now on, you will call Emily Mom." The stern words from his usually gentle grandfather must have really affected Kevin. After that, Kevin began calling me Mom. However, David and Kevin became even more distant and cold towards me. Thankfully, Tom kept a close watch, preventing them from making any more hurtful comments. On the surface, we appeared to be a family, but if you asked if there was love, that might have been difficult to say. David and Kevin were always cold towards me, but Tom was different. Tom did his best to mediate between David and me, trying to bridge the gap, and whenever the situation called for it, he would stand up for me. "Emily, I'm sorry for always leaving the housework to you and for taking care of Kevin," he would say. "No, it's all right. We are family." After all, I would smile and answer gently to Tom's kind words. To be honest, my current life was full of hardships, but there was a reason I couldn't change the situation. In truth, Tom had a chronic illness, and it seemed to have worsened since we first met. Tom started missing work more often, and I took care of him during breaks from my job. David showed little interest in his ailing father, leaving most of the caregiving to me. If I were to leave, who would take care of Tom? Thinking this, I couldn't bring myself to abandon Tom and divorce David. Sure, one might think I shouldn't care about Tom, since he isn't my blood relative, but I just couldn't think that way. In fact, I lost my father when I was a senior in high school. My mother had always been frail, and my father took care of her while working and raising me. When I was in high school, my mother, who had been bedridden, caught a cold and passed away. For the next 3 years until his death, my father worked tirelessly. In Tom, I saw a reflection of my father from those days. Back then, I was just a kid and couldn't do anything to help my father. I've lived with that regret ever since. So now, abandoning Tom was something I simply couldn't do. Perhaps Tom understood my feelings without me having to say anything. He treated me, who was devotedly caring for him, like his own daughter. I'm really glad Emily married David. David is a hopeless son, but please continue to stay by his side and support him, became Tom's constant refrain. I always listened with mixed emotions. Even after nearly 6 years of marriage, David and Kevin's attitudes remained cold. The rift between us would likely never be bridged, but for Tom's sake, I turned a blind eye to many things and continued my current life. As long as Tom was there, I could manage to keep going. That's what I thought until it happened. 7 years into our marriage, it was spring, just as Kevin was entering high school. Tom's chronic illness rapidly worsened, and he passed away. I felt as if I had lost a father for the second time and was consumed with grief every day. As I tearfully mourned Tom, David and Kevin spoke to me coldly. "You're not even related by blood, so stop crying so dramatically. Are you after his inheritance? You're so annoying. That's exactly the kind of thing a pathetic old lady like you would think," they said. Their words were so cruel that I couldn't help but argue back. "What? We've lived together as a family all this time. Tom treated me like his own daughter." To me, Tom was a real family. David turned a cold gaze towards me. "Real family? No way." Kevin laughed loudly. After laughing, Kevin sneered. "I've never thought of you as my mother, not even once." "You're mistaken. I only married you because my dad told me to," David coldly added, revealing that I had always been a burden to him. I had suspected their true feelings for a while, but hearing it directly from them tore my heart to pieces. With Tom gone, David and Kevin revealed their true selves and started treating me like a housekeeper. Despite both of us working, David stopped contributing financially and left all the housework to me. As a result, I had to manage the living expenses with my own earnings alone. Things got even worse. Kevin started criticizing my housekeeping and became physically violent. Kevin would throw things at me and hurl insults, saying things like, "The food is terrible, and I don't like the way you fold the laundry." Their treatment of me worsened with each passing day. As their behavior escalated, I began to fear for my safety. Of course, I had thought about divorce. I consulted with trusted people many times and questioned myself repeatedly. With Tom gone, there was no need for me to be tied to this house any longer. But I had made a promise to Tom, his constant refrain, "Please take care of David." It bound me. I decided to endure a little longer to honor Tom's last wish. At least until Kevin graduated from high school, I wanted to fulfill my role as a mother. However, the broken relationships never mended. David eventually stopped coming home often, and when he did, he found reasons to be violent towards me. Kevin, influenced by David, started bringing bad friends home and causing trouble. While he was well behaved at school and in the neighborhood, at home, he was verbally abusive and sometimes physically violent towards me. He gathered bad friends from who knows where and openly drank and smoked in front of me. I thought his behavior was too out of control and repeatedly tried to reprimand and advise him. "Please don't do that. I'm saying this for your own good. Shut up. I told you not to act like my mother." With that, Kevin threw a half-empty can and a lit cigarette at me. His friends laughed loudly at the scene. Kevin glared at me and shouted, "Get out of here!" And that wasn't all. Not only did Kevin ignore my words, but he also started stealing money from the house, out of my purse. I was at my wits' end with Kevin's misdeeds. At this rate, Kevin's future would be truly disastrous. I secretly started making various preparations and subtly consulted an expert about Kevin and David. However, no solution was found. As time passed, Kevin became a senior in high school. Despite my repeated warnings, Kevin continued to hang out with bad friends. Between his study sessions for college entrance exams, Kevin would repeatedly cause trouble under the pretext of taking a break, and I began to feel increasingly hopeless. Despite everything, Kevin was naturally intelligent and a good student, maintaining his reputation as an excellent student at school. With his charm, Kevin easily passed the school's internal selection process and was accepted into a prestigious university through a designated school recommendation. David was overjoyed and came home early to celebrate Kevin's acceptance, even though it was still daytime. That day, I took the day off work and prepared a celebratory meal from the morning, pouring my heart into it. I desperately wanted Kevin to eat my homemade food just this once. However, Kevin completely disregarded my feelings. When he saw my homemade meal, Kevin dismissively said to me, "I've always wondered, do you really think we would be happy with your homemade food?" Kevin said. And then he started taking each of my dishes from the dining table and slowly throwing them into the sink. David watched the scene with amusement, saying nothing. I stood there, frozen and unable to move. Kevin hurled these words at me mockingly as I stood there silently. "We don't need a fake mother. Divorce Dad and get out of this house." When I heard Kevin's words, what I felt was not anger, but pity. Kevin, unaware that I had been avoiding trouble and shielding him, had finally crossed a line that should never have been crossed. Despite having just been accepted into a prestigious university, with his careless words, David's conniving son was going to lose everything. "All right, I understand," I responded quietly. David, with a pleased expression, handed me a piece of paper. "This will make a great gift for Kevin's acceptance. Fill this out and submit it today." David handed me a completed divorce paper. I could feel my body trembling as I looked down, shaking. David spoke to me in a cold voice. "Finally, I can get rid of you. Now I can remarry Julie, who my dad forced me to divorce." Julie was David's ex-wife, Kevin's real mother. David had been secretly seeing Julie the whole time we were married. Tom never got along with Julie and always said she couldn't be trusted. Apparently, she had caused a lot of trouble for David's late mother as well. "Yes, finally we'll be free from this dreary old lady, Dad." "Yeah, unlike that housekeeper, Julie is beautiful and young," Kevin said. David and Kevin laughed loudly. After their laughter, they grinned and pushed me out of the house. "We'll throw your stuff outside later. Take it and go," they said. The door was slammed shut in front of me without mercy. Now I had no reason to show them any leniency. Shaking with anger, I contacted a person to set my long-prepared plan into motion. The person on the other end of the line was surprised to hear from me, but quickly took action. They adjusted their schedule and arranged to meet me in person the next day. The next day, I heard a voice over the phone say, "Due to the discovery of inappropriate behavior, your acceptance has been revoked." I could hear Kevin's bewildered voice from the other end of the line. A few hours later, David and Kevin barged into the university president's office, where I was, ignoring the security guards. David, furious, tried to grab me as soon as he saw me. I instinctively stepped back, but David, in a fit of rage, yelled and closed in on me. "Hey you, what are you doing here? Did you do this? Explain yourself." In fact, Kevin's acceptance was revoked due to his inappropriate behavior at home and elsewhere. It wasn't because I reported him, but rather due to videos posted on social media that had raised concerns. I don't use social media, so I didn't know the details, but apparently an anonymous tip had been sent to the university president with a video. The video was blurred, making it hard to identify faces, but the president recognized the room in the video, which led to identifying Kevin. The president was very surprised by this coincidence. I was also very surprised when I heard about it. This seemed like a perfect example of what goes around comes around. Anyway, the president immediately decided to revoke Kevin's acceptance. David and Kevin, unable to accept this, barged in to confront him directly. They believed that I had ratted them out to the president. "This woman is a compulsive liar. You have no idea how much I've suffered because of her," David shouted, beginning to tell the president how wonderful he was, and then hurling insults at me. The president's temple twitched as he listened. "Stop spouting nonsense," he finally said, his patience snapping as he reprimanded David. The president, Mark, was actually my late husband's brother. I had been secretly consulting Mark about Kevin all along. Mark had always treated me like a real sister, and after his brother, my first husband, passed away, he continued to care about me. I also trusted Mark and consulted him whenever I needed advice. Of course, I had told him everything about my remarriage to David and about Kevin. That's why Mark knew all about David and Kevin, as well as the layout and interior of the house we lived in. Mark was genuinely shocked when he saw the video of the accusation and recognized the house he knew. And at that moment, I had contacted him, so he made time to meet with me. I also reviewed the photos Emily took of Kevin's problematic behavior. "It's clear who's lying," Mark said, glaring sharply at David and Kevin. Intimidated by Mark's authoritative presence and piercing gaze, David was left speechless. I added to the pressure by presenting a business card. "Furthermore, I am demanding alimony and property division from you, David. From now on, all communications with me should go through this lawyer." My firm tone made the two fall silent. After glaring at me for a while, David suddenly made a bitter remark. "Well, Kevin got into a prestigious university. He can get into another one even now," David said. Kevin chimed in, echoing his father's sentiments. "That's right. I wouldn't attend this university even if they begged me." With that, the two stormed out of the president's office. I let out a long breath I had been holding. Mark also exhaled deeply. As March came to an end, I received a call from Kevin. In fact, after that, Kevin was unable to get into the prestigious university he had hoped for because he thought he was guaranteed admission through the recommendation he barely studied in the second half of his senior year. Naturally, his academic performance declined. Kevin, with his high pride, refused to attend any university that wasn't prestigious and decided to take a gap year. Furthermore, Julie, the woman David remarried, was beautiful, but also a spendthrift, an alcoholic, and in debt. Tom had forced David and Julie to divorce because of her debt and alcoholism. It seems David didn't know this, but Tom had told Julie to divorce in exchange for paying off her debts and giving her a settlement. After the divorce, Julie continued her spending habits, racking up more debt she couldn't repay. So, she approached David and Kevin to remarry, seeing them as her financial saviors. Kevin tearfully complained to me about it. "Mom yells at me, calling me a disappointment because I couldn't get into college," he said, sniffling. Kevin continued in a pleading voice. "You're my real mom. Please help me and Dad. We've reached our limit. We're family, right?" His sickeningly sweet voice sent shivers down my spine. What was he saying now? The nerve. Julie probably banked on Kevin's income after he graduated from a prestigious university. Kevin cried, saying that David had taken on a prohibited side job to pay off Julie's debts and had been fired from his major corporation. "I'm sorry, but we're not family anymore. You were the ones who wanted it that way. Don't ever call me again." I rejected Kevin and coldly hung up the phone. 5 years passed. I had thrown myself into my work, climbing the career ladder and achieving significant success. One day, I was shocked to hear news of a bomb threat against Mark's university. The perpetrator was Kevin, whose life had allegedly spiraled out of control because he couldn't get into college. I learned this from Mark later. "What a terrible grudge," Mark sighed wearily. I couldn't find any words to respond. Later, I heard from my lawyer that Kevin had been arrested by the police and that David and Julie had disappeared, leaving behind their debts. "Tom, in the end, I couldn't keep my promise to you," I said. On a bright and sunny day, I visited Tom's grave. While offering a prayer at his grave, I apologized. Tom was a kind person. Surely he would forgive me. I believed that and silently gazed at the clear sky. As I stood by Tom's grave, the clear sky stretched endlessly above, a quiet witness to my resolve. The weight of the past decade felt lighter, as if the breeze carried away the remnants of my guilt. I had tried to honor Tom's wish, to be a mother to Kevin and a wife to David, but their choices had carved a different path. Now, with Kevin's arrest and David's disappearance, the consequences of their actions were undeniable. I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow relief that I was free from their chaos. Returning home, I found a letter from Mark waiting on my doorstep. Inside, he detailed the aftermath. Kevin's bomb threat had been a desperate act, fueled by resentment and a life derailed by his own arrogance. The university had tightened security, and Mark, ever the protector, urged me to stay vigilant. "You've done more than enough, Emily," he wrote. "Live for yourself now." His words stirred something in me, a permission to let go. I began rebuilding my life with intention. My career flourished, and I reconnected with old friends who reminded me of the woman I was before David's shadow. I volunteered at a local shelter, finding purpose in helping others navigate their own hardships. The pain of Kevin's rejection and David's betrayal faded, replaced by a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed. One evening, as I sat on my porch under that same clear sky, I realized I no longer carried Tom's promise as a burden. I had honored it as best I could, but I was not responsible for their downfall. The stars above seemed to agree, twinkling with a clarity that mirrored my own. For the first time in years, I felt truly at peace,